Welcome. Today, we're diving into a question that concerns every tenant and landlord. How often can rent be increased? Whether you're renting your first apartment or managing multiple properties, understanding the rules around rent hikes is crucial. Rent increases are governed by a mix of local laws, lease agreements, and sometimes market conditions. In this video, we'll break down the general principles, legal limits, and practical tips to help you navigate rent adjustments with confidence. Let's start by looking at the basics of rent increases and why they happen. Rent increases can happen for several reasons. Sometimes, landlords need to cover rising property taxes, maintenance costs, or improvements to the property. Other times, rent may go up simply because the local rental market is hot and demand is high. For tenants, these increases can feel sudden or unfair, but there are usually rules in place to protect both parties. Understanding the motivations behind rent hikes can help you anticipate changes and plan your budget accordingly. Next, let's explore the legal framework that governs how often rent can be raised. Most regions have laws that set boundaries on how often and by how much rent can be increased. These laws are designed to prevent landlords from making excessive or frequent hikes that could destabilize tenants. For example, some cities have rent control ordinances that limit increases to a certain percentage each year. Others may require a minimum notice period before any change takes effect. It's important to know your local regulations, as they can vary widely from one place to another. Let's look at how these laws typically work. In most cases, landlords can only increase rent once every 12 months. This is a common standard in many jurisdictions, especially for tenants on a fixed-term lease. If you're on a month-to-month agreement, the rules might be slightly different, but annual increases are still the norm. This gives tenants some stability and predictability, allowing them to plan for the future. However, always check your lease and local laws, as there can be exceptions. We'll discuss some of those exceptions in the next scene. While annual rent increases are standard, there are exceptions. For example, if a tenant agrees to a new lease with different terms, the rent could change more frequently. Some jurisdictions allow for more frequent increases if major renovations are made or if utilities are included and their costs rise sharply. Emergency situations, like significant property damage, might also prompt a rent review. It's essential to read your lease carefully and stay informed about your rights and responsibilities. Before a landlord can increase rent, they usually must provide written notice to the tenant. The required notice period varies by location, but it's often 30 to 60 days. This notice should clearly state the new rent amount, the effective date, and any other relevant details. Providing proper notice ensures transparency and gives tenants time to adjust or negotiate. If you receive a rent increase notice, review it carefully and check that it complies with local laws. Rent control is a set of laws that limit how much and how often rent can be increased. These laws are common in cities with high housing demand, like New York or San Francisco. Under rent control, landlords may only raise rent by a small percentage each year, often tied to inflation. Not all properties are covered by rent control, so it's important to check if your home qualifies. Rent control provides stability for tenants, but can also affect the rental market in other ways. Some areas use rent stabilization policies instead of strict rent control. These policies allow for moderate, predictable rent increases, often set by a local board or government agency. Rent stabilization aims to balance tenant protection with landlord flexibility. The rules can be complex, covering things like lease renewals, succession rights, and allowable increases. If you live in a rent-stabilized unit, make sure you understand your rights in the annual adjustment process. In many places, especially where there is no rent control or stabilization, rents are set by the market. This means landlords can increase rent as much as they want, as long as they follow notice requirements and don't discriminate. However, even in market rate rentals, frequent or steep increases can drive tenants away, so landlords often balance profit with tenant retention. If you're in a market rate unit, keep an eye on local trends and be prepared to negotiate. A fixed-term lease, such as a one-year rental contract, usually locks in your rent for the duration of the lease. Landlords cannot increase the rent until the lease expires unless the agreement specifically allows for midterm adjustments. This provides tenants with stability and predictability. When the lease ends, the landlord may propose a new rent for the next term, subject to local laws. Always review your lease for any clauses about rent changes. Month-to-month rental agreements offer flexibility for both tenants and landlords. However, they also allow for more frequent rent adjustments, provided proper notice is given. In most places, landlords can raise the rent with 30 days notice, but some areas require more. While this flexibility can be convenient, it also means tenants should be prepared for possible changes. Understanding your agreement and local laws is key to avoiding surprises. Notice periods are designed to give tenants time to prepare for a rent increase. The length of the notice depends on local law and the type of tenancy. For example, A 30-day notice is common for month-to-month agreements, while fixed-term leases may require longer. The notice must be in writing and specify the new rent and effective date. If the landlord fails to provide proper notice, the increase may not be enforceable. Rent increase rules can differ dramatically from one state or city to another. Some places have strict rent control, while others have almost no restrictions. Always check your local housing authority or government website for the most accurate information. Knowing your rights and obligations can help you avoid disputes and ensure a smooth rental experience. Your lease agreement is the first place to look for information about rent increases. Some leases include clauses that specify how and when rent can be raised, or even set a cap on increases. Others may be silent on the issue, in which case local law applies. Always read your lease carefully before signing and ask questions if anything is unclear. If you receive a rent increase notice, you may have room to negotiate. Landlords often prefer to keep reliable tenants rather than risk vacancy. You can try to negotiate the amount, request improvements, or ask for a longer lease in exchange for a smaller increase. Approach negotiations respectfully and be prepared to compromise. Document any agreements in writing to avoid misunderstandings. If a rent increase is more than you can handle, you have options. You can try to negotiate with your landlord, look for a roommate, or consider moving to a more affordable place. Some areas offer rental assistance programs or mediation services to help tenants in difficult situations. Don't ignore a rent increase. Notice take action early to avoid eviction or financial stress. Not all rent increases are legal. Landlords must follow local laws and lease terms. For example, raising rent as retaliation for a complaint or discrimination is illegal. If you suspect an unlawful increase, document everything and contact your local housing authority or a legal aid organization. Protecting your rights is important for a fair rental experience. Some jurisdictions set a maximum percentage by which rent can be increased each year. These caps are designed to protect tenants from sudden, unaffordable hikes. For example, a city might limit increases to 5% per year, plus inflation. If your landlord tries to raise rent above the cap, you can challenge the increase with local authorities. In some cities, rent review boards oversee disputes between landlords and tenants about rent increases. These boards can mediate disagreements, review proposed increases, and even set allowable rates. If you feel a rent hike is unfair, you can file a complaint with your local board. This process helps ensure fairness and transparency in the rental market. Landlords may be allowed to increase rent after making significant improvements to the property. These increases are sometimes regulated, especially in rent-controlled or stabilized areas. The landlord must usually prove that the renovations justify the higher rent. Tenants should ask for documentation and check local rules before accepting a post-renovation increase. If your rent includes utilities, landlords may adjust the rent if utility costs rise significantly. This is more common in buildings where utilities are bundled with rent. Any increase should be clearly explained and documented. Tenants should request a breakdown of costs and verify that the adjustment is allowed under the lease and local law. When a new tenant moves in, the landlord can usually set the rent at any amount unless the property is under rent control. After the lease begins, increases are subject to the same rules as for existing tenants. This means new tenants should negotiate carefully and understand the terms before signing a lease. Landlords often use formal letters to notify tenants of annual rent increases. These letters should include the current rent, the new amount, the effective date, and the reason for the increase. Keeping communication clear and professional helps maintain a good landlord-tenant relationship and avoids misunderstandings. When you receive a rent increase notice, respond promptly. Review the notice for accuracy and legality, and decide whether to accept, negotiate, or move. If you choose to negotiate, do so in writing and keep records of all communications. If you accept, confirm your agreement in writing. If you plan to move, give proper notice according to your lease. Always keep copies of rent increase notices and any related correspondence. Documentation can be crucial if there's a dispute or if you need to prove the terms of your agreement. Store these documents in a safe place, either digitally or in hard copy. Good record keeping protects both tenants and landlords. If your rent increases, your security deposit may also go up, especially if it's calculated as a multiple of monthly rent. Landlords must notify you of any changes to the deposit and follow local laws about maximum amounts. Make sure you understand how a rent increase affects your deposit and request a receipt for any additional payment. If you refuse to pay a lawful rent increase, your landlord may begin eviction proceedings. However, the landlord must follow the legal process, including proper notice and court filings. Tenants have the right to contest an eviction if the increase is illegal or the process wasn't followed. Seek legal advice if you're facing eviction over a rent increase. The timing of a rent increase is important. Most increases take effect at the end of a lease term or after the required notice period. Landlords cannot raise rent in the middle of a fixed-term lease unless the lease allows it. Always check the effective date on your notice and plan accordingly. When your lease is up for renewal, the landlord may propose a new rent amount. You can accept, negotiate, or decline, and move out. If you accept, sign a new lease or an addendum reflecting the new terms. If you decline, give proper notice and plan your move. Lease renewal is a key moment for rent adjustments. A tenancy at will is a flexible arrangement with no fixed end date. In this situation, landlords can usually increase rent with proper notice, similar to month-to-month agreements. However, both parties can end the tenancy at any time, so communication is key. Always get any changes in writing. If you sublet your apartment, the original lease terms still apply, including rules about rent increases. The landlord must notify the primary tenant, who is then responsible for informing the subtenant. Make sure everyone involved understands the terms to avoid confusion or disputes. When you have roommates, a rent increase affects everyone on the lease. All tenants should be notified and agree on how to split the new amount. If one roommate leaves, the remaining tenants are still responsible for the full rent unless the lease is changed. Discuss any changes openly to maintain harmony. Adding a pet to your household may lead to a rent increase or additional fees depending on your lease. Landlords must disclose any pet-related charges in writing. If you're considering getting a pet, check your lease and discuss terms with your landlord before making a decision. If your rental includes parking, a landlord may increase the rent or charge extra for parking spaces. Any changes must be clearly stated in writing and comply with your lease and local laws. Ask for details and keep records of any new agreements. Upgrades to amenities, like a new gym or laundry room, can sometimes justify a rent increase. Landlords must follow local laws and provide notice. Tenants should ask for details about the improvements and how they affect rent. Transparency helps avoid misunderstandings. Some landlords require tenants to carry renter's insurance. If insurance costs rise and are bundled with rent, this could lead to a rent increase. Always clarify what's included in your rent and keep your insurance policy up to date. After a rent increase, always request a receipt for your payments. Receipts provide proof of payment and help resolve any disputes. Landlords are often required by law to provide receipts, especially after a change in rent. Keep all receipts for your records. For landlords, rent increases can affect tax reporting and obligations. For tenants, higher rent may impact eligibility for certain tax credits or assistance programs. Both parties should keep accurate records and consult a tax professional if needed. If you decide to move out because of a rent increase, give your landlord proper notice as required by your lease. Plan your move carefully and document the condition of the property when you leave. This helps ensure you get your security deposit back and avoid disputes. If you disagree with a rent increase, try to resolve the issue directly with your landlord first. If that doesn't work, mediation or local housing authorities can help. Document all communications and keep records of your lease and notices. Dispute resolution services are there to help both tenants and landlords reach a fair agreement. Keeping a record of your rent history can help you track increases over time and spot any irregularities. This information is useful if you need to challenge an excessive increase or apply for rental assistance. Store your records safely and update them regularly. Many landlords now accept rent payments online. After a rent increase, update your payment settings to avoid underpayment. Keep digital receipts and confirm that the new amount is processed correctly. Online payments offer convenience and a clear record of transactions. Open communication between landlords and tenants is key to managing rent increases smoothly. Discuss any concerns early and document all agreements. Good communication can prevent misunderstandings and build a positive rental relationship. To sum up, rent increases are a normal part of renting, but they're governed by laws and lease agreements. Most increases happen once a year, with proper notice required. Always check your lease and local laws, keep good records, and communicate openly with your landlord. Being informed helps you protect your rights and plan for the future. Understanding how often rent can be increased empowers both tenants and landlords to make informed decisions. By staying aware of your rights, reading your lease carefully, and keeping communication open, you can navigate rent changes with confidence. Remember, knowledge is your best tool for a successful rental experience. Thanks for watching, and best of luck with your rental journey.